Welcome back to the channel. We got our 1993 Mustang GT convertible up to our temporary shop so we can start putting our quarter panel and rear body panel and our other quarter panel on the car. Unfortunately, to get it here was a little bit of a struggle. Putting it on the trailer, in true Ford fashion, it wouldn't start. It has a extended crank, and by extended crank I mean it pretty much cranks until the battery's dead before it finally does start. So we definitely have a fuel issue. Not sure if it's too much or not enough. So we're going to go ahead and check that out before we go any further on actually fixing our rebuild. It was starting fine before, so I don't know what happened, but we're gonna have to figure it out because I do have to drop the fuel tank, and if it does happen to be that our fuel pump is just weak, perfect time to replace it instead of doing this whole rebuild, putting it back together, then checking it out later and finding out I gotta drop the tank again. Do it one time and we're done. So let's take a look at it, see if we can figure out what's wrong with it, and then start doing the rest of our rebuild. So when I say too much fuel pressure or not enough, the not enough, pretty easy. Weak fuel pumps cause not enough fuel pressure. The too much, Ford had this really weird problem back in the 90s, and their fuel pressure regulators would like to stick, and it would end up dumping, I don't know, 90 to 100 PSI of fuel pressure into the system. And when it did that, basically it just flooded the car right out. And I do believe that is kind of the problem we're having, because it does, when it finally starts, seem to be burning a little bit rich. So I'm thinking we probably have too much fuel or fuel at the wrong time or something. But either way, we need to hook up this fuel pressure gauge and go from there. They were nice enough to give us a little port here on the side for our Schrader valve. We got 0 right now. Let's go crank it and see what we got. I don't know if you guys can see that. $25, $40, $42. Looks like we're running at 33 PSI. To check and see what the specs are, I don't remember what these are supposed to be. I also don't remember what key on engine off is supposed to be. I did a little checking, and our fuel pump pressures are within specs, both key on engine off and key on engine running. It's at the low end, but it's still within specs, so we know we have a good fuel pump. I'm gonna say we have a good fuel pressure regulator because it's not jacking the fuel pressure way up, so we have some other issue. Do I know exactly what it is? No, and I'm not gonna worry about it right now. The only reason I was even getting into this is if it did happen to be a weak fuel pump, I only wanted to drop the tank one time, so I would change the fuel pump when it was out. Now I can throw it back in there, and I know whatever's wrong with it is definitely something up here. So it could be just a simple tune-up, or who knows what else. We'll get into that later on when we got the car all back together and we're ready to take it for its safety test and get it back out on the road. We're gonna have some other mechanical work to do, I'm sure, so we'll take care of it all then. Let's get back to throwing our body back together, or at least getting it all apart, so that we can get to the mechanical work eventually. No way to get there unless we start, so let's get to it. If you were wondering just how far the back end of this was shoved over, because you couldn't really tell from the video, well, that space used to be closed up. The exhaust was touching that fuel line, and it kind of melted it, which is going to make it a lot of fun to get off of there. So we'll start with the easy part first. We got some vapor lines to take off of here. We'll just slip a screwdriver underneath the rubber and twist at the same time until it gives up. Then we're going to do a little pull and pray on our plastic clip that holds our fuel lines up there. There's really no good way to get to the tabs, so you just pull them out and hope you don't break them. And luckily this one survived. Now we can get to the fuel line on our fuel filter. There's a little plastic tab on there. You can try to save it, and they're easy just to break. You can buy them from the parts store, and I have a collection from the ones I've changed over the years. They come with the fuel filters. And I'd always save them if I don't break them, because I'm a hoarder. Just ask the pizza girl. We got that clip out of there and just twist it off. Try not to get sprayed in the face with gas. Now on to our fun one. That little plastic clip is kind of melted in there, so we're going to try and pry it out of there. If we can get it out of there, it should slide right off. But it's kind of all one big melted puddle of plastic instead of being two pieces now, so we'll do our best. That line is replaceable from the hard line all the way back to the fuel pump, a little plastic section. So if we do need to replace it, it's not a big deal. And I happen to have one from our parts car, but I'm still going to try to save this one. If for nothing else, just for the challenge. I'm even making the face. I don't know what else to do. So we're going to keep trying. If I can get enough of that clip out of there just to get that line off, we'll figure out the rest later. I guess we could always get the torch out. That would definitely make it come apart and solve a lot of our other problems, as well as irritate all the experts, especially the safety experts. This car already survived one fire. Let's see how many lives it has. On our last attempt, 3 strikes and you're out. And then we give up the non-violent method for the traditional, always works, violent method. Each time I'm getting a little more aggressive. Still trying not to bend that metal line too much. So if it doesn't come off here, we move on. All right, you had your chance. Should have known peace was never an option. So we're going with a little more violent method. We're going to take the side cutters. We're going to trim this open. We're going to actually slit it open so we can slide it over our metal line. Just got to find a way to grab onto it. Even getting our side cutters in here is a bit of a struggle. We got enough of it trimmed out there. Pry the rest of it open. We just kind of cut a slit in it. So we'll just open it up. Probably stab our fingers, but it's okay. We're wearing gloves. And success. I mean, I win. Now we can disconnect our electrical connector for the harness that goes to our fuel pump and sending unit. Should be pretty easy. Just open up the tabs. Of course, there's all that sand in there that we imported from Georgia. Makes it a little bit more challenging. And also trying not to break the tabs at the same time. There we go. All of our pins look good. No corrosion in there. Now we can unbolt the straps for our fuel tank. We already took the filler nut out, so it should drop right out of here. I'll do the lazy turtle. Use our knee to hold the rest of it up. Unbolt this side. And our tank should drop out of here. And I'm sitting in a bad spot because if this thing was actually full, there's a big open hole right above my face. Luckily, that's not full. Now we can get our straps out of the way. Just line up the pins that go through the straps, push them out through the little hole in the bracket. Easier said than done. Nice and clean, no rust. Do the one on the other side, same way. Putting them back in is actually easier than taking them out. Now you can pull the harness out of the floor. Just push it up from the bottom. And twist it through. It only goes in one direction. And our entire rear harness is now free. We'll just set it off to the side. And we can start grinding off all of our spot welds for our rear body panel and our gas tank strap bracket. And everything else that's connected back here. I chose the electric grinder over my regular air-powered die grinder because it's hard for the compressor to keep up. The electric grinder has no problem. We'll grind everything off of there. And of course, I'm not going to use the belt sander. It costs way too much to operate and takes longer. Everything goes right through, especially with that bigger disc on there. We don't need to drill these out because we're not saving this outer panel, and we are saving the one underneath, so it's a lot faster just to grind them. Once we get them all ground out of there, we can get our breaker in there. Knock all these loose. At this point, there's probably more seam sealer holding this together than whatever's left of the welds that I didn't grind through. We're just going to work our way basically through the seam sealer. And some of that seam sealer did loosen up when we were grinding it because it did get hot enough. That was the little bit of smoke that was coming off of there. If we have trouble getting through one of the spot welds, we'll hit it from a different angle so we aren't tearing up the piece underneath. I stopped grinding because I had a bumper shock in my way, so we can go ahead and pull this bumper shock out of here. Just one bolt that comes in from the outside and through the frame rail, and the bumper shock's in the middle of it. Squeezes it together. And because this thing is pretty rust free, slides right out of there until you get to the end that's egg shaped now, because when you tighten that bolt between the frame rails, it kind of smashes it. It's no longer a circle, so you got to kind of yank it out of there. Now back to grinding. We'll have to smash the body panel out of the way so we can get to the welds underneath it. Now we can start using our breaker to break all of our welds loose. Oh, we missed one. Maybe two. We'll just hammer it out of there. Give me back my breaker. Now we had to dust off our drill because we don't want to grind this piece off. We're trying to save this top piece. So we're going to drill out our spot welds. If we go all the way through, we don't care because the bottom piece is our body panel that we're taking out of there anyway. Oops, a little far on that one. A couple more on the pinch weld here. Now we can go ahead and get our breaker in here. I'm going to use our makeshift one. It's a little smaller and these pieces are a lot thinner. We want to take our time and be a little gentle. Oh dear, I guess that's what happens when you use the wrong hammer. I guess the experts were right. So we're back after fixing our hammer. Put its head back on. And put a screw in there. It's not going anywhere now. We can continue using the wrong hammer. Looks like our piece is free. Maybe one last spot weld. There's not a lot of support left back here, so when you're hammering on it, it's kind of like trying to hit a moving target. And it's free. Even comes with that OEM rust. Now we gotta drill the spot welds out of this little piece at the bottom of our quarter. I made the executive decision to save this one because even though it's got a little bit of damage on it, it's in better shape than our rusty one off our other car. And if you have a spot weld that's not coming out, try hitting it from the other side. Get our scraper in. And then we'll hit that one that was being stubborn from the other side. If we would have kept hammering, we would have torn that apart. And then we'd have a lot more to weld up later. Now we're going to slip our breaker back there, and it becomes a multi-purpose dolly, so we can flatten this piece out a little bit. It's bent from when they pried against this with the reinforcement, and Ford tended to mangle up this piece on every one that they assembled. It's supposed to be flat, but very rarely are they. I don't know if that's the last piece they put on and just had to make it fit, so they just did whatever they had to do, but generally they're not flat. So we're going to make it flat, and if we have to bend it up a little bit to weld it, so be it. That's what Ford did. Now we have to pull out the rest of our floor extension on the side that goes around our filler neck. But in order to get to the spot welds, we got to be able to find them. So we're going to heat it up with a torch from the bottom, and then we'll be able to scrape out all that sound deadening and seam sealer. Little archaeological dig in there. If you heat it up from the bottom, it makes less of a mess. It peels off pretty easy. If you happen to be independently wealthy or one of those YouTubers pretending to be a rebuilder, you can always use dry ice on this to break all that off of there. It does just the opposite. It freezes it and cracks right off instead of heating it up and peeling it off. Propane is much cheaper and easier to store than dry ice. And before the YouTube experts get all offended, I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I do get a lot of comments, why don't you use dry ice like so-and-so? Well, I don't know what so-and-so does, but this is what the majority of people in the automotive industry use. They use heat. But if somebody else wants to use dry ice, well, use what works for them. We'll get all this sound deadening off the floor. Now we can see our spot welds. Not that I really needed to, because we're going to end up drilling them out from the bottom anyway. But if you take that sound deadening off of there, it makes your weld a lot cleaner. When you start welding through there and that sound deadening gets in there, you get a lot of porous welds. Now we can drill out our floor extension. And start breaking it loose. Missed one. Knock that one out of there. And we'll pry it off of here with our breaker slash dolly slash pry bar. We'll go back to our makeshift breaker. We don't care if we mangle this piece, we're taking it out of here anyway, so we're just going to bend it over. Now we're going to assess the best way to get to these last spot welds that are covered up with our body panel. We're going to need a specific tool. Can't seem to find it. It's, of course, in the last place I would think to look, in the drawer where it belonged. But we're going to choose violence. Smash that body panel out of the way. It allows us to see our last spot weld and that floor extension. It looks like we might have one more up here. Flatten this out and see. And yeah, we do. We'll drill that one out. We can use our scraper to break that last spot weld loose. Now we have a little stress relieving. Not the kind that we use when we're pulling the car to stress relieve the metal. It's more the stress relieving Scott uses after he's read one too many of the comments from the YouTube experts. That's how I remain so calm. I win. Looks like there's a couple welds that I didn't drill out on the bottom of that frame rail. We'll get them. You don't need to drill them. We'll just smash them out of there. And whatever's left, we'll grind off. And all that's left is this little bracket. There's a couple of spot welds on the inside of it. This is our bracket for our fuel tank strap, and there's no way to get to these spot welds. When we took it apart on our other car, we cut a hole in the floor. That's not really an option on this car because we want to save our floor. So we're just going to basically turn our breaker into a manual air chisel and slice this piece out of here. I guess I probably could have gone and got the air chisel, but we're just going to get the majority of this out of here, and then whatever's left, that little tab that's still on there, we can just grind those spot welds off, and then it'll be prepped and ready for our new piece to go up. And our new piece, we can actually weld it because there is a slot in that floor that we can get our welder tip through. We just can't get a drill in there. Now we're going to go ahead and straighten out this little flange on our trunk floor where the body panel mounts up. It's supposed to be at 90 degrees, and it's not because, well, we were hammering on it and prying on it and everything else, so we're just going to get it flat. Somewhat. Now we need to figure out what we're going to do with our floor that goes around that floor extension where our filler nut goes through. It's a little folded over. Clamp a pair of vice grips on there. And we'll get our Scott powered pulling tower. Probably against something solid. Our rear end should be pretty solid. Let's see if we can pull it out. And we can't. So we're going to learn the value of stress relieving. We'll pull out on it and hammer it at the same time. Comes right out. If we were still mounted on the frame rack, I'd go ahead and clamp up to it and pull out gently. Now we need to convert from the 4-ton puller to the 10-ton puller. So I put my foot on there and prying out, putting a lot of trust in that vice grip because it might end up on my butt. It looks like we got it pretty flat. I think we can handle the rest of it with a hammer and a dolly. Pull our clamp off of here. We'll go ahead and hammer and dolly out the rest of this. I chose to spend the time to straighten this little piece of the floor because this is the entire floor section. I don't want to section it in there, and I don't want to replace the whole thing because our other one was rusty. So it's easier to spend a little time to straighten this out than it is to replace the pieces or section it in. There is a method to my madness. I do have a plan.
My shit always works sometimes.
We're just going to work out the wrinkles with our hammer and dolly. There is one bigger one that's underneath that frame rail. So we'll smash it up a little bit, and then we'll use the dolly and the bigger hammer to get that out of there. We want it nice and flat. And we'll just work our way out. We'll get the lip at the end, and then we'll get the lip that our body panel welds onto. We'll get it close. When we put our new piece up there, we'll be able to tell exactly where it goes. So as long as our floor is straight, we can move that up and down and put it right back where the old one was. We'll get the front of our floor. There's a little bit of a wrinkle here, right where it bends at 90 degrees. So we'll flatten that out. Make sure you use the hammering face when you're doing this. Now we're going to use our hammer to pry that lip out a little bit and then wonder why the head falls off of it. We're going to unbolt the hanger for our exhaust. Now we can go ahead and remove all the seam sealer that Ford was using to hold our rear body panel on in case the welds failed. We're just going to heat it up from the bottom and the back side and then scrape it out of there. Better to get it out now than after that body panel's in the way. It's a little harder. And you get much cleaner welds whenever you remove any contaminants that might be in there, especially our seam sealer here. And with the heat, it peels right out of there. We have a little bit that seeped through on the outside from that wide open gap that Ford filled with seam sealer. We need to get that last little piece of our quarter that we cut off at the bottom here out, but we need to make a little room to get there. So we're going to pull the bottom bracket for our quarter window out. There's a piece on the top that keeps it aligned. I'm just going to loosen that up. Gives us a little more play to move this off to the side. Now we have a little room to work. We're going to get our seam sealer out of here. We're just going to heat it up from the outside. Then we'll go ahead and pry it out of there. If we got it hot enough, it should come out in one big piece. Look at that. Then we go ahead and grind our spot weld off of our wheelhouse. I think there was only one left. Knock that out of there. We can fold this piece down. Clean off our spot welds. A bit of archaeological dig there. And go ahead and grind those out of there. We'll get our scraper in there and knock the rest of them loose. Can't get to that one in the corner, so we'll just wiggle this piece until it gives up. And all that wiggling made us a little extra work, so we're just going to flatten this piece back out like it should be. We're all good. That's as far as we're going to go on our Mustang for today. Next time we come back, we'll get our wheel arch in here, a little piece that we cut off. We can just section it because back in the day, Repair procedures were pretty lax, so we can just put it in wherever we want to. Taking it all the way out underneath all this would just be way too much work, so we'll just section it in, replace this part back here that's, well, missing and smashed. We got to straighten a little bit of our floor just to make it look pretty, and then we can put our piece up here. And then we can start welding it up, but it's going to take a little work before we can start welding. So we'll do all that next time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.